Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Jack Marsh. I'm the co-founder of South Dakota Newswatch and the current board chair. It is wonderful to see such a big crowd here, and we're so appreciative of your attendance and your support. And we'd also like to welcome our online audience. This is being broadcast live on Facebook, and then will be archived both on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. With that, I would like to introduce my fellow co-founder, Randall Beck.
Thank you, Jack. And thank you. It's just a thrill to see everybody here tonight. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support and for your support of good journalism. We very much appreciate that. You know, as South Dakota Newswatch nears its 5th anniversary, that's kind of amazing to think about. 5th anniversary, Jack and I, as well as our board and our staff, are deeply proud of 325 in-depth articles that we have delivered in close collaboration with our media partners to the citizens of this state. You know, at a time of, thank you, agreed. At a time of vanishing resources in most newsrooms, South Dakota Newswatch has doubled down on the kinds of stories that take no sides, serve no special interests, and pursue the truth relentlessly. And that's an increasingly high bar. Our readers and media partners from Mobridge to Rapid City, from Sioux Falls to Lemon, see Newswatch stories, our work, as an indispensable part of the democracy that unites us as South Dakotans, as Americans. Yet, as we all know, we see mounting evidence across the country, and even here in South Dakota, of an intolerance, a deep intolerance, even anger, that has tarnished our discourse and driven us apart. Inflammatory rhetoric, personal attacks, hateful behavior, all mark the uncivil debate that divides rather than unites us. In a recent poll commissioned by South Dakota Newswatch, 79% of all South Dakotans said civility has gotten worse in the past 5 years. How can we change directions as a state, as a nation? And what is the role of media and South Dakota Newswatch in steering a new course? To help us navigate those and other really critical questions, Jack and I and the board are really pleased to welcome a distinguished panel of journalists here. Their topic tonight for us is this: Finding Daylight, Today's Media and the Political Divide. It's my honor to introduce this really distinguished panel. To my far left, I'd like to introduce Bart Faincook. Bart is, as many of you know, Director of Content for Newswatch, the journalist and byline behind most of those 325 stories I mentioned a bit ago. To his right is Stu Whitney, former Argus Leader media columnist, coach, and sports editor who joined Newswatch in February as an investigative journalist. And next to Stu is our friend Angela Kennecke. Angela is a longtime KELOLAND journalist and anchor who has recently started a new chapter leading Emily's Hope, a nonprofit that raises awareness about the opioid epidemic. And finally, I'm particularly pleased and honored to introduce my friend, our moderator, and board vice chair, Marcy Burdick. Marcy, a South Dakotan by birth, is a journalist, manager, and former corporate executive at Schurz Communications. She was the National Broadcaster of the Year in 2013. Marcy's going to lead our panel discussion tonight, and we'll reserve time at the end for questions from you, our guests. So again, thanks for joining us, and Marcy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Randall and Jack. It's an honor to serve with you, and it's really an honor to be here tonight with these three folks who have done the hard work for years in South Dakota, finding daylight. I want to start by asking, and let me just say, I'm going to start with a few questions, but as our journalists answer tonight, if there are burning follow-up questions you have or things that it brings to mind, please feel free to raise your hand. Jack will bring a mic around to you, and we'd like you to participate in this discussion rather than just listen. So really, anytime you have a question, please raise your hand and wait till we get the mic to you so people at home can hear your questions as well. But as Randall said, our panel tonight is called Finding Daylight. And let me ask you all first, and any of you can start that you would like. You know, in general and from your life, what role do you see media playing in a healthy democracy?
Do you want to jump in, Bart?
Sure. I think the media and organizations like Newswatch are critical to the success and continued success of democracy. Without truth, without the ability to know what's real and what's not real, without the someone to uncover facts and hold officials accountable, we start to see a weakening of the basic structure of our democracy, of what holds us together as a nation. That I found it interesting that during the recent civility panel, that Professor Moen, former dean of our arts and sciences at USD, said that our country's set up on the desire to have difference, that differences, that talking about things that are complicated, complex, difficult, things we might disagree on, that's built into who and what we are as a nation. But how we move on from there, do we find common ground, or do we stand up and scream at each other, name call, and walk away? I think where the media is there to bridge that gap. I think whether we've seen our role weaken in some respects, and I know we'll talk about that tonight, the role itself is to provide a basis for those conversations to occur, a basis in fact, because we see continued misrepresentation of the facts presented, lies presented as fact. And I think the media's role is really to give us a base for those difficult conversations, those important conversations, and also to hold the people who have the ability to make laws that affect our lives and our bodies. They spend our money on things that are important and sometimes not so important. But we need the media there as a check, one of the checks and balances for the democracy in our country, and it's really super important. And I think that we've seen diffusion of the media, and we'll probably get to that. But overall, I think that without the fourth estate, I take that term, I take that to heart. It's very important to me, and it's very important what I do and what I've basically built my career around, and that is telling the truth, setting a baseline for conversations that might be difficult but need to occur. So with that, I'll give Stu a shot.
Yeah, appreciate that, Bart. First of all, I want to say it's great to be up here with Angela. I mean, it's kind of like having the Hatfields and the McCoys in the same panel. So,
hey, we're friends now.
Yeah,
you don't work for the Argus, I don't work for Kello, we're friends. Right, Corey? Oh, right, Corey?
So it's good to have some cooperation there. I would echo Bart's comments. I would say, specifically in South Dakota, the importance of having, when you've got a state that has sort of one-party rule and where one party sort of dominates in state government, I think it's even more important to have the media. It almost fills the void of that secondary party, that party that is not strong enough to sway things in peer, to sway things like laws that provide more transparency. It's more important than to get things out there, because you've got people in government essentially that they're, in journalism, it's mainly finding ways to publish things that people don't want you to publish. The rest is public relations, as they say. And so when they can make laws that make it more difficult for you to publish such things, it becomes very difficult. And I know that Angela will have things to say about that as well, in terms of the lack of accessibility, the lack of transparency coming out of the executive branch as well as the legislative. And in some, when you look at the ethics issues going on, maybe even the judiciary. So it's a challenge. We're going to talk more about the shifting media and the different types of media and echo chambers. A lot of times people are kind of seeking out media that tells them what they already want to hear, confirmation bias. And so a lot of it is on, I think, the public at large too, to become more educated in terms of where to get their news, because news is a very broad term these days, believe me. And so being able to drill down on sources that are credible and that you can trust, I think is extremely important.
I've always considered myself a journalist with a capital J. And when I say that, I mean that I was trained as a journalist, and I was trained to not be biased and to try to tell as many sides of the story as possible. But when that story doesn't agree with someone's viewpoint of the world today, you get a lot of pushback. So I don't think we have a free press. I don't think we have a democracy without a free press. And I've always seen myself as a conduit for the public. If I'm in a courtroom covering a court case, I'm just there for Joe Public because they can't be there. They're at work, they're doing something else, they're not gonna be at important court cases. They're not gonna be questioning public officials about how their tax dollars are being spent. And people forget that it's their tax dollars paying those officials' salaries. So I think we're just essential to have an open government and a free land.
So you've all kind of alluded to this, and I'd like to talk about, and you have deep roots as journalists and a good arc in all of your careers. But what's changed in either the state or the nation? Sure. What's changed, and what may have changed in the media landscape as well over the arcs of your career to really, in my view, make the media more important in a functioning democracy than it's ever been? So Angela, go ahead and start.
Yeah, well, I have to say that I've worked under every governor since Mickelson, and things have truly changed in our state in the way that the media is treated. Now, maybe those politicians would argue that we treat them differently, but I would argue that I don't. And I have seen a dramatic change, especially in PR, ever since people from Washington, D.C. came in to run the governor's office. And I saw that right away with one of them calling me up and screaming at me on the phone over some headline and wouldn't even give me a chance to look to see what they were talking about. And that's kind of where I saw the tipping point or the turning point. And the access to government, I mean, let's face it, I don't think any of the governors liked me or liked some of the stories that I did, but Janklow always sat down and talked to me, always. Of course, he tried to divert me in a million different ways, but once I did the story, I didn't hear a peep from him because I got it right. Now, if I would have gotten anything wrong in that story, he would have had my head on a platter. Dugard did interviews with me about Gear Up, and stopped doing interviews with me after a while, but at least he did them for a while, and if I came to him with a camera, he'd talk to me. This administration is so different, and I'm not here just to bash this administration, I'm just to tell you about my experience. I cannot talk to a single cabinet member in this administration or get an interview for a story, nor the governor, because they want. So let's go back to those folks from Washington, D.C. that came in. When they don't like something you report, they also send out an email to everybody that's on their email list and every other journalist in town, bashing your story. Did that happen to you too, Stu?
Oh, it's a strategy.
It's a strategy.
They want to intimidate you into printing things, like we said, that they don't want people, that they don't want out there.
And also pointing to a publication that is partisan, that does have a certain bias, and saying you should report like this person. Your report should be praising these actions. And that's what we get now as journalists in this state, and I've never seen anything like it. I've been flabbergasted since 2019.
Well, it's as someone I interviewed recently said, it's a feature, not a bug, with some of these politicians. And I want to shift to another element of the media here in a second, but just following up on what Angela said, you've kind of got this thing where they can play on a general distrust of the media. You see the media not polling really well right now on national polls, and I think that was a strategy, starting with a very dangerous term of fake news. Anytime there was something that was critical of a certain administration, that if you can get people to distrust the media, if you can get them to say that they're after someone, and you can get your minions to believe that, then you can just shrug off a negative story and just say, oh, there they go again. And when you splash out a group email attacking a reporter, attacking a news entity, then that is part of that strategy, I think. And really quick on that note before I move on to something else, I saw recently that in Florida, where they've gone through the hurricane and a lot of natural disaster situations where they need to get word out, there was some talk that the governor was having trouble getting the word out because they basically don't have a relationship with traditional media. And when you need traditional media, it's because they have ways of getting the message out to a lot of people that trust those sources. All of a sudden, they were kind of lost in that regard. But I think,
Stu, I would say that I don't ever want to have a relationship with a politician, but I do want to have mutual respect, right? And I think that's where things have fallen apart, is that there isn't mutual respect.
Yep.
And like, we have a job to do, and in the past, politicians have understood that we have a job to do, and they've respected that. And now it's more like, you can't do this job, we don't want you to do this job anymore. That's what it feels like to me, because I don't ever want to have a relationship, but I want to have a mutual respect, right?
yeah, just like any other working relationship. You want to jump in
So,
there, Bart?
yeah, I was going to say, Bart, I want to hear from you too, but I do want you also to all three of you to comment about not only has kind of the political and the communication strategies changed with politicians' abilities to go direct to consumer through Twitter and things like that, but the media landscape has changed in the state and in the nation, and I'd like you to also, maybe comment about that if you think that plays a part in what's happening.
Well, thank you, Marcy. I think it absolutely plays a role. We're very far removed from the days of Walter Cronkite, where trust in our presenter was extremely high, and when he said something, the vast majority of people believed it. But what we've lost, I think, is we've lost, when newspapers began to falter, we lost the levels of editing, the thoughtful discussions that would take place in newsrooms, in the editor's office. There was nothing better than plopping yourself down in a chair with a great editor and talking about a story and trying to figure out what it means, how do you present it in a way that's fair and accurate, and where you take all sides into account. So now when you have media that can pop up and you have individuals running their entire newsroom on their own and producing material that they publish online and reaches a huge audience, you've lost all those, again, those checks and balances that I think make a society, a newspaper, and a media organization better. So that has really changed. One of the things, this idea, Stu mentioned the echo chamber. I was just thinking to myself, I think it was this morning while I was getting ready, this news about Herschel Walker in Georgia actually, paying for abortions for girlfriends and things like that. And I'm like, what if you only watched Fox News? What if you were someone who was devoted to a news source? And it's not just on the right. It's on the left. MSNBC also takes an attack dog sort of approach to the news. What you may never know about that. So you don't even know about a candidate's hypocrisy that they're presenting. And I was just thinking to myself as I thought about this presentation, that's occurring more and more, where people are being told or fed things they already believe. That's not good. We all need to challenge ourselves. When you read a news article, I hope that you think, boy, I don't know what the reporter thinks, but I've been given some things to think about here. I've been challenged to think about things in new ways and look at other people's voices and other information that's been brought forward. I strive to do that in every Newswatch article. Always look for that extra, that not the obvious, go beyond the obvious, but bring a new voice in. Find the person who's really on the front lines of that issue. And I think you'll see that in this week's piece about a teacher who's providing food to kids on his own, with his own money, because the federal government program to provide free meals for all school children, regardless of family income, has now ended. So going and meeting with that teacher takes it to the next level. Greater truth, more reality involved in it. I could tell you one thing when I came to, so I was a reporter, I'm from Wisconsin, I was a reporter and editor in Florida for about 15 years. When I came to South Dakota, it was like going back in time. And not just in the way people dressed or talked or anything like that. It has nothing to do with that. But in terms of government openness, no, you're looking good. You will never meet a politician or someone in state government in this state who will tell you that they're very transparent. They're all for openness. Well, it's not true. In Florida, you had all aspects of crime, of the law enforcement system were open. Probable cause affidavits, videos from the jail, videos from police worn cameras, videos from police vehicles. You could actually get on a listserv and in real time read the emails that a city council member or a school board member were receiving from the public. It's not the Sunshine State because it's hot. I think it's the Sunshine State because they're operating in an openness. And what I would hear,
they have a legislature where two parties are both powerful too.
Well, there is more.
A lot of people talk about the governor, but there's a strong Democratic Party in the legislative branch. But not to interrupt you, Bart, but you talk about Florida. We had a fairly well-known athlete here who went down to play in Florida and got in some trouble down there. And I did a story on it. I was amazed by what I was able to get in terms of police reports and mug shots and all this stuff. And it was just like another world based on what we are used to here in South Dakota. But it's not just access, and it's not just transparency. It's the journalism model that we've seen a lot of change in. I worked at the Argus Leader for 30 years. Corporate media model. Toward the end, we were able to follow what we call metrics, and we were able to see exactly how long a person, not only how many people had pulled up a story to read it, but how long they engaged with that story. And obviously, that's a business. We're looking for advertising. We're looking to take that to advertisers. We're looking to answer to corporate. And so there tends to be more of a skew toward, hey, don't write this unless a lot of people are going to read it. Don't write this until it gets attention. The nonprofit model, I'm not saying the nonprofit model is perfect, but it allows us to rely on people like yourselves to just take us where the journalism leads and not have this pressure of, sensationalistic material or gotcha journalism. I think we're able to take some deeper introspective looks at policy and politics, and so I'm pretty gratified that that's occurring now.
Well, I would say even in when journalism is a business model, good journalism gets those people to stay on our site and to read or watch for a long time. Yep. So the stories I've done over the years got some of the longest views out of all stories that we do. So I think people are craving good journalism and decent stories and not just the sensationalism.
Yep. Good point.
And I wanted to just really quick, I know that the governor apparently doesn't like Angela. but
I don't know why.
But what happened is, she's right, that there was a shift, because when Newswatch launched, I remember she and I would talk on the phone for 20 minutes about a number of topics.
Yes.
She would just call, we'd arrange for the call in advance. We'd just go over a bunch of things that were on my mind that might be on her mind. And now I send a list of 10 written questions and I get a canned statement back. I can just hear it in Ian Fury's voice. So it really has changed, and it's not just her. And the problem that I've seen is if one agency is standoffish to the press. Frankly, the Department of Agriculture in South Dakota has never been available to me. I've reported all my stories from the field and the farm, and I don't rely on the Department of Agriculture for a lot of information because they had been standoffish. But what's happened now is Christie's approach has bled to all these other departments.
And I think there's a bit of a mandate for the cabinet secretaries too, that they aren't supposed to speak. And it's not just me. I mean, it's apparently, I've been told she won't do interviews with just me, but it was everybody in our newsroom. Couldn't get those interviews when requested.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask this question. In general, you've all alluded to the fact that there is a national attack on the media, and there's also all the polls show that there is a declining trust in the media, with the exception of when those polls are switched, and there was just one done recently by the Radio, Television, Digital News Association. The equation is flipped when you ask specifically about your local journalist, and the polls flip to, oh no, I don't mean those guys, I mean the media. I don't mean the Argus, I don't mean Kello. So there is still a high degree of trust in local media. What do you think we as journalists need to do, or is there anything we as journalists can do to rebuild trust, or how do we need to communicate some of these issues to the public?
I think it's, you're right that I think local journalists are trusted more, but I think some of that's starting to bleed over into local journalism as well. And we're, like in terms of like Kello is owned by a huge media conglomerate, Nexstar. But you like to think that people would trust the people who live and work in their communities, right? I mean, that's the purpose of local news.
Yeah, I don't think local politics is anywhere near as polarized, obviously, as national politics. I was driving over here and MSNBC was talking about the Supreme Court and Trump appealing to the Supreme Court on some of these classified document issues, and they were basically saying, "Oh, the Supreme Court is tainted. God knows what's going to happen." Out of curiosity, because I knew I was going to come to a media forum, let's see what Fox is talking about, and it was about how the DOJ was trying to screw Trump, and so these are powerful entities. These are a lot of people tune into these news entities, And like Bart said, we're a long way from Walter Cronkite. And so I can see with this, on both sides a lack of trust there. My mom lives at Grand Living, a wonderful independent living facility here in Sioux Falls, and she's very educated, went to Wellesley College, very educated woman, and she brought up to me the other day this thing about litter boxes in schools, and wondering if we were, and she's not crazy, believe me, just sort of brought it up in casual conversation, and I'm like, Mom, not you too, you know, because that is a hoax that started on Facebook, went through Newsmax, went through some of these far right channels, and is complete BS to try to sort of make fun of or denigrate the some more serious transgender issues. And so, I mean, that's kind of where we're at with some of this stuff, where we need to fight back, and as media, we need to give people, I don't want to say both sides, but I do want to say middle of the road, credible journalism that they can trust. And even some of the nonprofits out there, we don't, but a lot of nonprofits out there do have an agenda that, you have to look at where the money comes from, just like anything else. They always say follow the money. And you look at some of the nonprofits, and they do have an agenda, whether it be from the left or the right. And so they are encouraging their reporters and their editors to push certain policy positions. Newswatch, and Jack can back me up on this, does not take money from entities that might push us one way or another, no corporate entities, and we rely on individual donors. And so I think that allows us to rise above the fray somewhat, but we certainly have a responsibility day to day to maintain that trust.
Yeah.
I would just say briefly that I feel like never in my career have I been more open and honest with the people I interview about what it is I'm trying to do. And I let them know Newswatch does not have an angle or an agenda. Did you mean to say that? I used to have, when I was younger, you wanted the top headline, you wanted the A1 on, top headline on the front page. If somebody makes a blunder in a conversation, I go back and make sure that I got it right. I don't need to play gotcha with people. We're not gotcha journalists. And I tell them why I'm doing a story, what the motive is. I give them an opportunity to reply to things that other people have said. I just really feel like I go overboard in trying to treat people with respect, be honest, and be straightforward, more patience in interviews. And I think that all at the end, and then stand by the material. And if something is wrong, correct it immediately, and be willing to do that. Don't fight and argue and try to deflect. But just being open and honest with people about who Newswatch is, where the material is going to appear. I tell every single person I interview, hey, this is going to be in every newspaper and across the state and on TV station websites and on radio. So very open about who we are and what we're trying to do and what I'm trying to do with an article. And I think that people appreciate that. I feel a sense that no one calls and complains after that I misrepresented something or that's...
I think what you're talking about is transparency on the job and transparency to the public and how we do our job, which is so important. And I've always tried to do with every step of the way, that we asked and we were denied, or that we try to get these people to tell us their side of the story, and also to make a correction. If we all make mistakes, every single one of us makes mistakes on our jobs, and we have to make corrections, and they're public. It's out there.
Yeah. So. I'm going to throw it open to you in just a minute, but I want to ask one more question. I'm going to ask you all to suspend your natural South Dakota modesty for a moment. I would like you to tell us about times in your careers as journalists where your reporting has made a difference that you look back proudly and say it had a positive impact on the laws, democracy, civil discourse, picking where it had an impact.
Well, I can start because Randall, sitting over there, was the executive editor at the Argus and worked with, I think Patrick Lally was in an editorial capacity at that point. And they had worked to get these state plane logs during the Rounds administration so we could see where the state plane was being used. And they sort of brought me in after they got those logs, and I was able to sort of break down those trips one by one. We did see that he was going to some of his sons. His son played for the Pierre high school basketball team at the time. We found out that he was using the state plane to go to some high school basketball games, or at least coordinating trips to, you look at the basketball schedule and it fit fit perfectly with some of these events that he was setting up. There were some that were just flat out family trips too, and so that led to a major series that we did, and it also led to state law being changed to prohibit the state plane being used for private purposes, which kind of brings us to where we are with the current administration to a certain extent. But that was one where, it took a ton of work before I even got involved, just getting those state logs. And I think we had to go and write them down by hand in Pier in some dank office down in the basement. It was not easy to get, and so it was a true team effort. And editors and publishers love awards, so we won a few awards for that. But it also led to state law being changed, which I think is definitely something that I'm quite proud of.
I want to
Thank
hear
you.
Angela's first,
Thank you, Stu.
because these are going to be good.
Well, I guess the thing that I'm most proud of, I spent 3 years working on the Gear Up investigation. And for those of you that don't know what that is, South Dakota got federal, state, and in-kind donations to the tune of about $60 million that was supposed to get Native American children into college. And data showed that not a single Native American student went to college because of it. And there was a lot of corruption going on. Obviously, there was a huge tragedy in Platte that prompted that investigation. And I just really dug into that. I was just appalled. I just kept thinking about the children that were murdered because of the man misusing the grant funds. But it was so much deeper than that. And I kept thinking of all the Native American kids on reservations and outside of reservations who should have benefited from those funds. And I was just brokenhearted, and I knew I had to find out whatever I could to let people know what was really happening. And following those 3 years, we exposed a lot. We exposed the education mafia. I love educators, I'm sorry. We exposed the education mafia in the state. It felt that way. My mom's a teacher, my grandfather's a professor. I mean, I love educators. But all of these people were getting wealthy off this grant money for very little work, and it was kind of the good old boys. They all knew each other. And because of that, there were conflict of interest policies put into place in the state. So they are supposed to, when they're on boards and when they're on like the Board of Education, they are supposed to disclose their conflicts. That wasn't done in the past. And then the other thing was the formation of the Government Accountability Board. Now, that may have just been a platitude, because as we're seeing with the Government Accountability Board, it doesn't have any teeth. But
Well, it should have been IM 22, which passed by the will of the people and then was quickly repealed by the state legislature. So the Government Accountability Board was sort of a half measure that they put in to say, oh yeah, we're still doing this, but we threw out that thing that you passed. And so that's why it's sort of wishy-washy now, because that's exactly what it was meant to be.
Right. But those two things. And the only other thing would be, I worked with some veterans who should have received their Purple Hearts, and because we stepped in, and because we're public, we have access to our congressional delegation, we were able to help them get those Purple Hearts that they should have gotten. So that was really cool.
I've done a number of stories for Newswatch that I take some pride in, that I think have uncovered, the abuse of children at the home in Plankinton. I think writing about the sad state of how Native Americans are taught in our schools right now and allowed to fail. But if I really look at one story over my career that probably had the greatest impact on public safety, there was a trooper on the interstate I-10 in Florida, and he was on what they call a moving construction project, and that's where they were actually cutting the rumble strips in a new stretch of road. And the highway was open next to him, and a young lady, a FSU student on her phone, 75 miles an hour, smashed into the back of his patrol car, and he burned up inside, and despite attempts to save him. Well, I investigated that accident and found that there were a whole bunch of rules that had been violated, including you should not have a police officer with a person inside, a police car with a person inside, as the last vehicle that's basically exposed to moving traffic. So after that story ran, I did some follow-up stories also about a particular type of Ford vehicle, the Crown Vic, that police agencies were using, and it had the gas tank in the back. cops were dying in rear-end collisions. But mostly, my takeaway on the other story is that after that piece ran, they went out and bought thousands of these. They're called attenuators. They're essentially shock absorbers, and so they implemented a state law that that had to be the last vehicle serving the safety position on any kind of moving construction project. So I don't know if more, construction workers or police officers were saved, but that was a direct outcome of my reporting, and I've always been happy that hopefully things were a little safer on the roads.
Well, thank you all for the journalism you do that, in my view, makes our state a better place to be. It looks like we have a question over there.
Hi, Greg LaFollette, Sioux Falls. I have to admit that I think it was probably 6 years ago that Jack and Randall invited me and a bunch of other people to a meeting to discuss this thing they called South Dakota News Watch, and I thought they were completely insane, had no idea what the heck they were talking about. And I'm very grateful to them for what they've built and for your help. But I'm curious about how you feel about what's happening to media in general when we now have South Dakota News Watch, we've got Axios, we've got Jody Schwann's Sioux Falls Business, we have Sioux Falls Simplified, we've got Dakota Scouts, we have all of these things, all of these people doing great work, but I find that I have to go here and there and there and there, and I don't have any together curation and things. Just talk about what you see happening and what's this going to look like in another 10 years?
Well, I think there's going to be a weeding out process to a certain extent. I don't think that they can all survive, but I think, when you're seeing all these things popping up in South Dakota, it's because of some of the things we mentioned earlier about commercial or conventional media struggling. And, it started, I don't need to go through the whole, how the internet changed the media structure, but I think it's a good thing, at least in the early stages, because you're going to be getting more opportunities, as you said, to get some good reporting, and then sort of decide which ones you want to lean on. Those are different financial models too. With Newswatch, you basically you can go to our website and plug in your email address, and then just sit back and watch the stories roll into your email inbox. That's basically all you have to do. We'd like you to donate some money as well, but the other ones have a different, slightly different model. Dakota Scouts going to a print model, which is surprising to me because everyone else is downgrading their print, and it's very expensive, and young people don't read print. So that was a decision, and we'll see how things play out. But I think in the interim, to answer your question, it's going to take maybe some weeding out by the readers. That's the climate we're in. I think readers need to be more distinguishing in what they're reading. It can be confusing, but I think you'll find the ones you can trust eventually.
As the one, I'll take. I think my mic died, but to take moderator privilege as the former corporate executive on the panel, I think we're kind of almost in the Wild West again. The traditional business model for print and broadcast is collapsing. If you watch TV, it's collapsing as fast as newspapers did. Some of your favorite programs are now going to streaming platforms. So the revenue model for local television will collapse. I think we are, and what Jack and Randall did, they were ahead of the curve in the state in terms of helping to say, our business model at Newswatch is let's plug a gap. Let's help support the traditional media by filling a gap of investigative and enterprise that is expensive, takes time off the street from the daily grind of news. So that's our business model. The others that are out there are different. And I agree with Stu that there'll be a weeding out period. But as I used to tell people, you'll get the journalism you deserve. And that means by voting with your eyes and your checkbook and your reading to determine what is the kind of journalism that you want going forward. And you're in a great position to influence the future. Question over here.
Dee Knudsen from Sioux Falls. So more and more often, I feel that open primaries is the only hope for lessening the divisiveness in our state. Do you have any thoughts on that reform idea?
I know it's been brought up. It's, again, we go back to a situation where why would Republicans agree to that? You know, they control almost every aspect of the state right now. They control all three branches. Certainly, I take that back. They control executive and the legislative. So going to open primaries would benefit Democrats and independents. I don't think Republicans in South Dakota are in any mood to let Democrats off the floor right now, or to let independents be part of the more part of the process than they are, which is why they're not allowed to vote in GOP primaries. So on paper, I think it's an idea that bears more scrutiny, but I don't see it happening in the near future.
You have another question if you guys don't have anything. Agree with Stu.
Thank you. Mary Gary, Sioux Falls. A bit of a timeline. I am one of the people who would remember watching Walter Cronkite when he...
I was a kid.
I remember this.
I knew there were a couple.
Yeah. And my comment and question is this. You've touched on something that I feel is very important. I now have no trust at all in national broadcast journalism. Not since Walter. I have decided that I will have my trust rebuilt only locally by local reporters who live and work in my neighborhood. Talk me out of this view.
I don't want to talk you out of it.
Well, I would just say that I don't think every national outlet is, I think many are trying to do the best that they can. And they're under a lot of pressures as well. And they're under influences sometimes that we don't even know about. But I do think, yeah, you should trust your local journalist.
And I just wanted to add about the competition. I think it's good for South Dakota, and I think it's good for South Dakota News Watch. I'm a competitive person. I think that when you have, if they are born out to be what I think that these are legitimate journalists that are coming on to the fore in South Dakota, I think that's good for you all. I think it's good for us. And I think it's good for the state. And so we will continue, as a constant media watcher and watcher of government, I see a lot of small things that I think are important, but they don't necessarily fit right into our model right away. And I would like to see more of those things reported. So I think the competition is good, and I'm welcoming it, and bring it on. But in terms of trusting your local media, I think that, or the national media, you know, you have to, like Marcy said, you know, you vote with your ears and eyes, and think about what you're hearing. And is there another side that's being ignored? I think most of the time you can decipher whether something's being intentionally ignored or not. And that's what I see more often than not. Yes, there's lies being told, but more often it's that there's parts of the story that are not being told. And so I think you have to keep your feelers out for that.
Our next question requires an introduction. This is Rodney Gist, who today is celebrating his 96th birthday. Rod Gist.
Lying by my mailbox was this magazine, the Epoch Times. Have any of you heard of the Epoch Times? Okay, well,
My condolences.
they somehow got my address and they sent it to me. And what they're saying is we are the real thing. You don't need to listen to anybody else because we've been cutting into, and of course that's what all of us are looking for.
Well,
This
sir,
says
you
here,
weren't born yesterday. We know that much.
This is what they say: standing outside the political interests of the pursuit of profit, and starting point of our goal is to create a media for the public benefit, to be truly responsible to society. We endeavor to educate readers about today's most important topics, seeking to broaden and uplift minds and believe that rational, balanced debate is key to fostering a healthy democracy and a compassionate society. Sounds good, isn't that what we all want? And an independent media outlet, we use our freedom to investigate issues overlooked or avoided. And often media and offer other media outlets. We seek to highlight solutions and what's good in society rather than for what divides us. We report respectfully, compassionately, and rigorously. Boy, that sounds good. I'll read this every day. But I don't even know where it came from. I don't know who publishes it.
Never trust a mission statement.
The Nazis had great propaganda as well.
Yeah.
Well, then every once in a while they throw in $1 at start of Biden's term now is worth 88 cents. And every once in a while they'll throw in something like that.
That's actually pretty good, I'll give them that.
But am I to believe that?
So I think your question, Rod, is should the Epoch Times be believed? Is that your question?
Yeah, I've never heard of it before. But
Well, I think
I never heard of it before. I don't know where they got my name, but they thought maybe I'm a vulnerable creature.
Well, I will just say we have quite a birthday party tonight because Dr. Lauren Cheddar's birthday is today too, and he is 80. So happy birthday to both of you. Question over here.
I would just say about that this is the challenge you all face. This is the difficulty here, is that could be, there's things like that have come out of my mouth when talking about Newswatch, which I hold in the highest integrity of any journalism organization I've worked for and with, and I've held many of them in high regard. So you have to then go beyond that statement and look at the material that's published. And you have to say to yourself, does this feel right? And that may not happen in one edition. That may not happen in one article or 1 week's worth. You have to keep your mind sharp and open but sharp and critical, and think about what you're reading, and does it feel right? Does it seem right? And does it truck with what I know from the rest of the world around me? And what does my gut say? And I think you're feeling it. You're getting a feel there, but that's the challenge, and it's challenging right now in American media.
if it plops down on your doorstep and you didn't order it, that says a lot right there. I mean, that's the print publication component of a phone scam. But I agree with you. I think your presentation was sufficient to make your point, sir.
Okay. I'm John. I'm from Sioux Falls here. I want to ask you about the width of the band that you speak to. That is, we talk about the need for balanced and factual and truthful journalism, but how many people actually want that? I see people on the right and the left who they don't want facts. They believe. They don't think, and somebody talked about things that make you want to think about stuff. But it looks like an increasing number of people who want to believe and not think, and they want alternative facts if necessary, rather than true facts. And do you see that shrinking, or can it be expanded? What, in your opinion, can make that expand?
I'm not cynical enough to think that there aren't a lot of people out there that still want the truth. They want to hear from credible voices. They want real journalism. They want things uncovered, and they don't want just propaganda parroted from a national regime on down. I do agree with you that it is more of a problem than it's ever been, perhaps. And some of the things, publications like that have got their meat hooks in a lot of people, and there are cults of personality in politics now rather than issue-based discussions. We had one debate in our governor's race here in South Dakota when there should have been at least three, because there are a lot of issues to hash out, and we need to be adults and listen to matters of the state, matters of the kitchen table, and not be flinging mud around. So I'm not cynical enough to think, I mean, look, we have a lot of people here that care about the media's treatment of a highly partisan society, and I've not reached the point yet where I've written society off. I think we keep fighting the good fight.
Well, I do think kill the messenger has always been a theme throughout my career. I remember people before the internet and social media was a big thing, right? Saying, oh, the media, you know, that's been around forever. And the kill the messenger has been around since the Kings. You know, you don't like the message, you kill the messenger. And I think that has amplified right now. I really think that if I do a story and I try to include all sides possible, as many aspects of that story, and I do really in-depth stories, someone is going to be really mad at me because because I did the story, first of all, and because it didn't, you know, jive with their viewpoint of the world. So I think that it's definitely increased, and I don't know how to reverse that. Maybe that's why I got out of news. No, just kidding.
I'm going to take a slightly contrarian opinion on that. I mean, I know my wife's family is from Sioux Falls long ago. One of the, you know, opened one of the first grocery stores here, and they called it the Argus Liar. And when I got to Rapid City, it was the Rapid City Urinal. So we all know that those views have been around for a long time.
That's what I mean. That's what I was saying. They have been around for a long time. Yeah.
But what I've seen, I think, and during the evolution of Newswatch, I'm also our social media manager, and I really track our audience, and I try to expand our audience, and we have expanded it. And so what I have seen, I think, since, and COVID may have exacerbated this, but I think it's improved. I see the number of trolls sort of falling down a little bit. They're getting tired of responding. No, they're getting tired of just complaining and fighting about things that they don't really take even the time to read about. So I'm seeing, I think, it's not a massive reinvestment, but I'm seeing a reinvestment of energy among our audience, among media audiences, to be smarter about this kind of thing that's happening and all the choices they have to make. But I'm seeing less and less anger and vitriol. I don't want to make too much of it because it's not like we've come back to sanity completely. But I do see signs that especially in South Dakota and in our reach, that people are being a little bit more rational and reasonable. So I remain hopeful.
It's like that old joke, everybody hates a lawyer, everybody hates a journalist until they need one. And in this state, I was going to say, everybody hates a lawyer, everybody hates a journalist until they need one. And in this state, I have heard, and I've only been back 4 years, but more conversations in social settings from people who know I used to be a journalist about what do we do to reverse this tide? Why can't we know about ethical violations? Somebody said in a meeting the other day, if the governor got a speeding ticket, we'd know what the fine was. The governor is apparently guilty of some ethical violation, but we don't know that or if there was a penalty. And my response is, you can do something about that. You can get active, you can care, you can read, you can write. I think journalism now is starting to matter to people in a way that it didn't. So.
We have time for just one final question.
No pressure.
Thanks. Marcy, a little bit on the nose, a lawyer to a journalist now. Dan Doyle, Sioux Falls. This may be a little bit redundant with some of the things we talked about, but I think it brings a little bit of everything, what everybody's brought together. Bart, you talked about competition, hopefully raising boats. I worry a little bit about what competition means and what people are competing for. My question is, though, we don't want government, and we probably shouldn't have government under our system to be controlling media. Who is the party then? We put a lot of faith in readers, I guess, or observers, but when can the media start holding the media accountable? And that's probably more targeted towards national media, but we do a pretty good job. I think the media does a pretty good job of holding a lot of the vessels by which bad information gets spread. A lot of talk for the last few years about social media, but I don't know that there's been a lot of calling out of directly, aside from late night comedians of the Fox Newses and the MSNBCs and the folks that are the corporate leaders of media groups. Your thoughts?
Well, the corporate entities on a national basis will listen to their bottom line, as we've been saying. And you saw after the Trump administration, should I move this microphone away from me? Or after the Trump administration, after he left office, all of a sudden Washington Post was not exactly, their digital subs went down quite a bit. No one's watching CNN anymore because they were Trump bashing 24 hours a day. So now you've got a new boss coming into CNN, and they're going to bring them back a little bit more mainstream, like we maybe not quite to where we used to remember CNN with Bernard Shaw and how it was straight news, but they're adjusting the dial a little bit, and so I think that's a way to kind of keep them honest locally. I think the competition will do that. If I would hope that if one of these organizations is spewing administration propaganda or repeating election denier lies or things that the publication that the gentleman mentioned might be putting forth, I would hope that would draw people away from them and that the cream will rise to the top. But I guess the proof is in the pudding on that. But I would sure hope that competition will lead to more accountability.
I think the media needs to police itself as well. I mean, that's how we look at it at Kello, that we police ourselves and we have standards that we adhere to. But we're not going to call out another news organization.
We need to.
Yeah, that's just something that isn't really done.
I would just say that I've seen a reemergence of groups, the strength of the South Dakota Newspaper Association. Dave Borowik's here. He's been involved with Newswatch. We get together, we talk to one another. The Solutions Journalism Network that Newswatch has created a relationship with looks at problems, wants to not stifle reporting about problems, but always looking for, well, where have things been improved? What's worked elsewhere? Is that a replicable solution or idea for your community? So focusing on internally on sharing, talking amongst ourselves as journalists, I think that's part of the self-policing that Angela's talking about within our industry. And I've seen an emerging strength of those organizations as the media has become diffused, and we've seen more opinionated players passing themselves off as unbiased news. I think that's been a reaction to that, and I hope that continues. But there's the Institute for Nonprofit News that Newswatch is a part of. There's probably a Zoom forum once a week that you can tune in on about sharpening your reporting, being more accurate, being more clear and presentation of your materials, looking for solutions, doing good work, and holding ourselves to the highest standard possible. I see a reemergence of those groups and those ideas.
Well, please help me thank our panel for not only tonight, but the work they've done over their career.
We're extremely grateful for the generous support you and others have extended to South Dakota Newswatch over the past 5 years. Because we do not accept advertising or commercial sponsorships, Newswatch is entirely dependent upon voluntary donations and grants. Individuals provide 3/4 of our income. Last year, we had nearly 350 individual donors, including many of you. We remain steadfastly committed to producing trustworthy, thorough, and nonpartisan journalism for all people of South Dakota. News and information that we believe is essential to a healthy democracy and that helps to ensure a well-informed and engaged citizenry. We have exciting plans for 2023. Randall Beck and I, the co-founders of South Dakota Newswatch, also have been the de facto CEOs since inception, overseeing news and business operations and supervising our 3-person staff, Bart Fancook, Stu Whitney, and Rob Joyce. We are in the process of recruiting and hiring our first chief executive officer, who will be responsible to steward the continued momentum of this organization. Randall and I are not going away. We will continue to be involved, but in a governance role as members of the board of directors. Growing the staff, improving our journalism, enhancing its relevancy, and deepening its impact will require additional financial resources. Tonight, we officially kick off Campaign 2023. We ask you to continue your support and to consider increasing your support of our important work. Individuals can double the impact of their gifts made by December 31st thanks to a $50,000 match underwritten by Dan and Arlene Kirby, and Dan is with us this evening, and a group of foundations that support nonpartisan, nonprofit news organizations. That is a dollar-for-dollar match of your donations between now and December 31st. We will give special recognition to those who contribute $500 or more toward the annual operating budget. Those donors are honored with membership in our First Amendment Society. The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, unchanged since adoption of the Bill of Rights in 1791, protects 5 freedoms essential to the American democratic system: religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. South Dakota News Watch is among the beneficiaries of this constitutional protection. Multi-year pledges of annual giving have been a key to our sustainability and our fiscal health. If we have earned your support, please consider a 3-year or a 4-year pledge at whatever amount is appropriate for you. We encourage you to go online to our website, which is sdnewswatch.org, for further information about our mission, our donor policies, our principles and practices, staff, board, and to access all 325 projects and in-depth articles produced since February 2018. Rob Joyce is our executive director, and I would just ask Rob to kind of explain what is the process if you want to contribute to South Dakota News Watch. Rob?
Thank you, Jack. I'd also like to recognize the 100 media donors, partners that we have in South Dakota News Watch that help us with their print and broadcast to share our work across the state and their communities. And we'd like to thank you for your trust in South Dakota News Watch and your support helping us sustain a fragile quality of life in South Dakota. As Jack mentioned, we'd like to ask you to renew your commitment to News Watch, extend your pledge, or increase your giving to News Watch to help us continue our important work. You can do that tonight with the donor envelopes that we gave you at the front, or leave a check at the registration table with Nicole. You can donate online, like Jack mentioned, with a one-time gift, or you can write a check for online giving on our website using a credit card or PayPal at southdakota.newswatch.org. Some may prefer to do a monthly donation. We can do a recurring monthly donation, again, on our website at the donate page, and again, use your credit card. But most importantly, setting up those multi-year pledges helps to sustain our work and our mission. Yes, South Dakota News Watch does not accept advertising or any anonymous donors, but we do need you, and we thank you for your continued support of News Watch. Jack?
Thank you, Rob. If you ever have questions or you want to learn more about South Dakota News Watch, please reach out to me, to Rob Joyce, or to any member of our board. All of us are listed online and in the brochure distributed this evening, and we would be happy to meet with you anytime over coffee or on Zoom or over the phone. So to those of you gathered here in person, those participating by live stream, or who may be watching this video recording at a later date, thank you for your interest, your encouragement, and your partnership. We pledge to be good stewards of your gifts, to encourage civil discourse, civic engagement, and to seek and report the best obtainable version of the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, we stand adjourned.